Hi, Paul from Apex Mindset. Slide your finger over and subscribe to my channel, especially during the next, I would say, few weeks or so. I'm gonna kind of deviate from the purpose of what the channel is designed for, which is to help people with their relationships, because we're in a crisis. We're also a mindset. We discuss things regarding mindset, and so that you can have a better mindset and outlook, and better behaviors, so you can have better relationships, and so you can have better success, in life. But we're in a crisis. Okay, we got the coronavirus crisis thing is happening, and so I have a lot of information. People are asking me stuff. I just did a video on being more prepared just due to the amount of training experiences that I've had. There's a lot of things that I can offer you guys that would be helpful. And so we're going to stick to kind of the mindset things, but these are things that are affecting what's going on up here, so that we can help you get through this tough time. Some people are having a real tough time out there, and it's going to pass. This will pass. Okay, you're going to be okay. But sometimes it doesn't seem like that with the constant influx of negative news going on, and the fact that there is a real crisis. You know what I mean? It's when you're in the shits, it's hard to realize that you're going to be out of the shits in no time. All right. So let's talk about this. This one is about martial law. All right. Now I'm going to state that this is my opinion because I'm a military person. I don't state what I do on these. What I do is not for public consumption. Okay, but this is my opinion, okay? But I do have a probably more of an educated opinion than somebody who doesn't look at this stuff and isn't in the military and doesn't, some of you civilians at home might not see the other side of how the government works. So I'm going to offer you that opinion, but understand that I'm not a policy maker or anything like that. So this is just my thoughts. But there's a lot of there's a lot of fear over this martial law thing. Okay, it's immediately people's go-to. Out in Michigan, people on social media, I'll see what people are talking about. It's immediately, they're assembling in Selfridge. They're getting the National Guard in Selfridge Air Base. What's going to happen? Oh, I heard from so and so that in 48 hours we're going to get locked down. It's going to be martial law. A guy I knew who was a federal agent said this. A guy I knew who. Okay, listen, that is all panic thinking. All right, I know you're trying to gauge. You're trying to look at where the dangers are. That's the reason you're attracted to that information. That's not woke. Okay, that's not informed information. All right. We're not going to go. So it's just because somebody says something, to include me right now, that doesn't mean it's true. You have to vet this stuff out. Okay, I'm telling you to look at what I'm saying and look at the facts, look at the argument, and make a sound logical decision, not based on anxiety or fears, but based on reality. Based on the reality on the ground of what's happening. You want to have what's been called a neutral mindset, where you're not thinking negatively, but you're not thinking excessively positively either in the moment that you're trying to at least assess the reality. You're just without judgment, with outcome independence. You're looking at the scenario for what it is, and you're trying to see what is the reality of the situation. Make sure that your mental map of what's going on matches objective reality. That's what you're trying to do. And when a lot of you guys are having these discussions about martial law, your mental map, because you don't know how this stuff works, isn't matching reality. So I'm hopefully going to help fix that here for you today. Now let's look at. There's a reason why we can't. Well, first of all, definitions. What is martial law? First of all, so some people would say, well, we're in martial law right now because the government made us close businesses and has put restrictions on us. That's martial law. Well, I would disagree with that. If there's no clear definition of what martial law is. If that's what you think it is, cool. When I talk about martial law, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is more like how Iraq was in 2004, 2005. Okay, where the military can make decisions on the ground whether or not somebody can live or die, whether or not they're going to be prosecuted or not, and there's no due process. Okay, so there is no courts, there is no due process. It's literally military leaders making a decision on the ground as to what they're going to do with somebody. All right, so you've lost your rights. You've lost your rights to habeas corpus. That is the military decision at this point, based on the tactical circumstance. These things, can happen on a small scale. This stuff can happen. Let's look at Iraq again, 2004, 2005. Okay, that was martial law because it was a war zone. Okay, and you had combatants all over the place. The Iraqi government, as well as the U.S. that was there, couldn't differentiate between who was a combatant and who wasn't, unless, of course, they're being shot at by that person. So they instituted curfews. They instituted a degree of martial law. So after a certain time at night, after curfew, it was assumed automatically that if you were out at all at night, you were an enemy combatant. And I'll tell you, a lot of Iraqi people got themselves shot during those times just because they didn't abide by those rules. You know what I mean? It was a clear, open, free to shoot. Okay, if you see a person, for a while, and that was not just U.S. doing that. That was the Iraqi government as well. And so that to me is martial law. Okay, is where it is so bad and dangerous that people can shoot you on sight if you're not agreeing or obeying or doing what they say. You know what I mean? The military can just detain you on site for disobeying the rules as they see it, with no habeas corpus, no legal intervention, no ability to call an attorney. You know what I'm saying? This is what martial law is. It's when our actual regular laws are out the window and military takes over. Okay, that's my definition, how I look at what martial law is. Now, has this ever happened in our past? Well, it has so it has happened prior to like technological revolution. It has happened. Okay, but I'm not going to go through those historical examples. Let's talk about more recent. So we can look at the Boston Marathon bomber situation and how law enforcement handled that, which I don't agree with how they handled it, by the way. And a lot of people I know who are way more educated than I am in law enforcement, I've had a conversation with them, and they felt like the way that, the state of Massachusetts and Boston handled that, finding that marathon bomber, where they felt that it was just bad police work, the policy decisions, obviously not the officers on the ground necessarily. So what they did there was within a 2-mile radius, it was about 2 miles where they thought the Boston Marathoner bomber was hiding. They cordoned it off and they pulled people out of their homes at gunpoint. All right. People had already lost their gun rights as it was for the most part in Massachusetts in that area. And so people had no ability really to defend themselves. And I mean, if you did the wrong thing, they could shoot you on sight. Okay. So that was an example of martial law, but it wasn't countrywide. It was in a 2-mile radius to pull people out of their homes in order to, find the Boston Marathon shooter, whatever, or bomber. Okay. And so that's an example of martial law. But here's the reason why we can't do that in the United States as a whole. It's simple math. Okay. We don't have the numbers to do it. If the government wanted to do it, they couldn't. All right. So I keep talking about my Iraq example, but the United States, well, first of all, understand that even in Iraq, although the United States is 22 times bigger, excuse me, the United States is 22 times bigger than Iraq. Iraq is like a little bit bigger than the state of Colorado. Okay. So, but even that, okay, even about something that's about the size of Colorado, you couldn't institute martial law all over the country of Iraq. Even though that was the rule, you couldn't actually enforce it. You just didn't have the manpower. Well, times that by 22, okay? We have a few 100,000 people that would make up all the law enforcement and military and National Guard, that work for our government, and we have well over 300 million people in the United States. A couple 100,000 people simply cannot police up over 300 million. It just isn't possible. So from a sheer numbers perspective, we cannot do martial law like they did in Boston. Now, Boston was pulling people out of homes, obviously in a quarantine. They're forcing you to stay in the home, but you cannot do it at a large scale like that. We just don't have the manpower to do it. Okay, so, and even like North Korea, for example, where they've tried to do, there's different times where they've had serious control over North Korea. North Korea is the size of the state of Mississippi. Okay, we have over 300 more people in the United States than North Korea has in their entire country. So you have to understand some of these totalitarian nations that'll do martial law. They just don't, they're a lot smaller and they're doing it at a lot smaller scale, and they're still doing it unsuccessfully because from a manpower perspective, they don't have the manpower. And we will not have the manpower to do martial law. So simple math, we can't do martial law. We can mobilize. National Guard is being immobilized to help out with medical stuff, okay, and doing what they do best in an emergency within the United States, besides going to war. Within the United States, they do best, which is, helping respond to a crisis. They're not here to police people per se. They can't, or institute martial law. They can't do it. Even with the National Guard involved, there's just not the numbers, okay? So that is right there a reason why all these ideas of martial law and stuff, they're out the window. Okay, that can't happen. All right, there's nobody that is going to be able to take your rights away, force you at gunpoint, take away a habeas corpus, all that stuff. Not in a large scale in the United States. We don't have the numbers. Okay, and then there's the other aspect, which is a good thing, controversial, but for some of you, but we have Second Amendment rights. Okay, so not only is there well over 300 people in the United 300 million people in the United States, we have just about as many guns. Okay, and that is not saying that people should take to the streets and shoot law enforcement because they want to drive around at night or go eat at a restaurant. But if it gets too bad and too restrictive, people are just not going to put up with it. If it gets to the point where cops, and National Guardsmen or government, law enforcement, will say, workers are getting violence towards the citizens can fight back. And that is a check to that balance, or a balance to that, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so that is a major preventative measure. And when things were cool a few weeks ago, when no crisis was there, people would have these philosophical discussions whether gun rights were something that we should have, and what about mass shooters, and whatever, is the juice worth the squeeze to allow people to have their guns. Hopefully now you see that it is worth the squeeze, because not only do we have a lot more people than government workers. And that's also assuming there's a lot of people who work for the National Guard, military, and police who would not participate in martial law like that. They're just not going to do it. Their philosophical beliefs is just, there'll be some that would participate, but there's going to be a lot that won't too. You got to consider that, okay? But that being said, citizens have the right to protect themselves. If the government turns tyrannical, that is why it's important that people have their gun rights. And it's not to say that we want to go use those rights against the government, but the mere fact that people have the ability to do that is a check. It creates a check and balance against government power in situations like this. And so now you take the martial law thing off the table because you have too many people with too many guns. Now they have to come up with other solutions to problems, you see. And so that is the crux of why martial law cannot happen. Now, the government has become more and more, we'll say, socialist, okay? Excuse me. It's not a political discussion I want to have with you. This is just the facts. The government has become more and more restrictive on personal liberties and rights, and people have cashed in their personal rights in certain states. States like California, Illinois, where the Boston Marathon thing happened. That would never happen in a lot of states down in the South, probably not in Michigan, okay, where people were allowed to be forced out of their homes like that. That option was on the table because people gave their gun rights up in Massachusetts a long time ago, and they gave up a lot of personal liberties for more of a socialist ideology, if you will, or social good, and it backfired in the crisis. It backfired during that situation. And so there's some states, we look at San Francisco, they announced this total lockdown. Well, yeah, it's San Francisco. It's California, and people gave up their rights. So in certain areas where people give their rights up, okay, the government will take more of those rights away from you, all right? And so we have situations the government is taking rights away By saying you can't have freedom to assemble, by saying that you can't go to work other than essential businesses, whether this is the right decision or wrong decision isn't the point. It is a violation to be told that you're going to be given a $5,000 fine and that you can be prosecuted for breaking these executive orders. It's overstepping. It's overstepping your amendment rights. It is, okay. So the government is doing that and can do that, but will they take it to a point where they're doing it at gunpoint, where military is and police are shuffling people around, like in a martial law scenario? That's where we're probably not going to see that. And there is no, you have to look at too where mutual gain is involved, something called mutual gain, where we all benefit. So the government has to rely on money, okay, and our productivity as citizens in order to survive and do well and flourish and all that stuff. They need us to go out and make money. So if they do martial law, that's problematic, right? Because now we can't produce anything. All right, a free market economy is what allows us to produce, and that's what we're based off of. Okay, I mean, that's a whole, I mean, these are real basic concepts, guys. I'm not going to get too far down the rabbit hole with some of this stuff, okay? But, they need us to produce, though, as citizens. And so doing things that would make us not produce for too long, okay? I mean, they're doing things to make us not produce because of the healthcare system and to protect that, and because of that potential cost, okay, to human lives as well as financial. But it's a it's a trade-off, and there's a point where they can't, to go much further would violate their ability to, to get tax dollars from us, to get productivity from us. And obviously that's not going to work. You know what I mean? So instituting this martial law scenario is just not, it's not realistic. And when people like politicians over in California say, well, we have the ability to do that, but we don't think it's necessary, like they're full of crap, and they need to not say things like that, because number one, they don't have the ability to do that. Not really. They could say, we're doing martial law and here's the penalty and police can roll you up, but they don't have the manpower to enforce it. Okay, so that's a reality. And then people, they don't have the manpower to, especially don't have the manpower to enforce it. If people say, hey, F you, I'm not going to do that. You see what I mean? And so that's all fear mongering stuff. That's all trying to control the public. That's all BS. You know what I mean? So don't listen to the BS. Reality is no. Okay, this cannot happen in the United States. We just, at any scale, we could do it again in a small couple mile radius because we concentrate personnel and equipment to a small radius, like an area, and certain, like with a marathon bomber example, where it's only 2 miles, so we have the personnel to cordon that off and do it there. But in the United States, no. In an entire state, no. Okay? They could institute really restrictive things in populated areas, all right? But outside of, major cities and certain things, there's a limit to what they're going to be able to do, even if they wanted to do it. And so the case I'm making for you, I'm trying to let you understand here, is that they don't really want to do that because it violates their ability to extract money from this populace, okay? And it doesn't actually solve the virus problem either. Having martial law and people uprising and trying to break the rules, and the civil unrest is not going to create a scenario where this virus is kept under control. Okay, so what have they done in most places? Well, they've closed businesses down. Some places will do a curfew. I don't know why the curfew. Okay, that seems to be an overstep, but some will do a curfew regardless, and it's essential businesses only that are open. So they've taken, and what has law enforcement focused on? Law enforcement is not forcing people to stay in their homes. Like when the media, like TMZ or whatever, says, "Oh, San Francisco is on complete lockdown," and everyone thinks martial law. They're not on complete lockdown. They're not on lockdown really much more or any more than Michigan is, the state where I'm from, or some of these other states. Because all it is that it's the same thing. Essential businesses are closed down. You can still go to the grocery store. You can still go to the pharmacy. You can still go pick up gas. You can still pick up supplies. I don't know if there's a curfew or not, so there might be a curfew. Okay, but that's their total lockdown. And law enforcement does not focus their efforts on individuals. They focus their efforts on businesses. So if a restaurant or bar is going to insist that they're going to stay open and have patrons in their place, then law enforcement can fine them $5,000. You know what I mean? And prosecute them or break up that gathering. So that's where the law enforcement's focused. It's not focused on your individual citizens and forcing them to stay in the house. So you see what I'm saying? So the media like presents something, people read the headline, they don't get into the entire thing. They think martial law, the government's against us, everyone's in a panic. Don't panic, okay? There's no reason for that. And if you're on social media talking martial law like it's a real thing, you know, hopefully after this video you can stop doing that, because it's that kind of stuff that incites more panic behaviors. It excites people to act erratic, people to be more anxious, and people to do things that are, quite frankly, not productive or harmful to other people, whether it's buying toilet paper or fighting over supplies or whatever. These are anxiety driven behaviors. And all of these fantasy ideas about martial law and, oh my God, the government's gonna, it's time, the government's coming after us, okay, all that stuff, that's only fueling more anxious behaviors, okay? We're trying to contain a virus. That's what the government is trying to do. They're only going to be able to do what they're doing now with as restrictive as it is now. They're only going to be able to do that for a few weeks. And then they're going to have to start coming up with plans, opening things up. And according to, if we're looking at what's happening in China and Korea, the thing's over in 3 months. Okay, so even if they were total lockdown, whatever, like San Francisco style lockdown, we're looking at a 3 month period when the virus incubates. And how much can our economy take, right? So I mean, this is not, you got to think realistically, guys. All right. So hopefully this quells some of your anxieties. Share this with friends because people don't understand it. Okay, I know it's a little longer video, but share it. Okay, people need to understand this stuff and understand the nature of what martial law is and why it's really not going to happen in this scenario or in the United States for that matter because of the things that I've mentioned. So thanks again. Subscribe to the video. I'm going to do more stuff that will help you get through these times, as well as valuable material for when you're not in a crisis. All right. All right. Well, thanks again for the support.